Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of I Can't Remember Shit, a memory podcast. I'm your host, Evan Barton, and today, me and a lovely guest are attempting a thoughtful descent, a peaceful reminisce, and an honest recollection of our own memories. Every episode, my guest and I discuss one aspect of memory in particular that they don't know about until I tell them right here, right now, on this episode. Some of our favorite memories and our least favorite memories can evade us in the moment and might make us say, I can't remember shit. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of I Can't Remember Shit. I am delighted to welcome my partner in crime, Jesse Ulrich, to the podcast. Jesse, what's
Hello.
up?
How you doing, Evan? This is fun being on this side of the table.
I know. We're doing the thing that we've both set out as a joint venture to do, which is podcasting and entertaining, and now we get to do it to each other in a cool way.
Listen, being a guest is so much more fun than being a host. So
Yeah, you don't have to plan anything.
no, I can just say whatever I want. It's great.
Well, and I've been a guest on Pod for Good. It was a long time ago. I feel like not that I've gotten more eloquent with age, but like I feel like I don't even remember what I talked about because what the work that I was doing at the time has changed drastically.
It was like 3 jobs
then.
ago. Yeah.
Exactly. Absolutely 3 jobs ago. But yeah, I'm super glad to have you on. I can't remember shit.
Thank you.
What do you know about I can't remember shit?
Very little actually. I believe you told me once what the premise of the show was, but I don't want to get it wrong by saying what I think I remember, which is ironic because I can't remember shit about what I can't remember shit is about. So there you go.
That's perfect. Avid listeners will know that you're not the first person to say that. People can never remember the name. It's essentially apropos at this point for it to be named what it is and for people to not remember it. So I don't take any offense. But yeah, it's a memory podcast, and we dive into our favorite and least favorite memories related to one topic.
Okay.
And we also kind of start off on like a little memory lane jaunt of each other, which is really fun. And but before we get into all of that stuff, like memories in general, like when I broach you with that topic of just memories, what do you think about? Do you think about good memories, bad memories?
Well, I mostly think about my own like issues with memory and like lack of, we all have problems with short-term memory these days just because there's so much stuff being thrown at us all the time. And just sort of like my constant work that I've been doing on trying to just like write things down and so I don't forget them, especially as we run a business together. Like I need to do this thing. Like it's not only me that I'm depending on now, it's other people are depending on me, and that changes the emphasis that I put on my own memory.
Yeah.
So
well, it's the issues with memory. It's interesting. I think that like as we get older, people start to like reframe memory as being like something they either struggle with or like they never have enough of.
Yeah.
Whether it's like impeding executive function, whether it's like, I can't remember the good time, or I only remember the good times about things like nostalgia core and things like that. I find it interesting, and the whole premise of the show and really my curiosity behind it is that I want for people to like think about memories maybe in a different way than they have, and you kind of have to do that by like intentionally like dissecting it in this way. So I'm excited to do that with you.
Let's go.
And I think that we get to, like you said, we're running a business together, and so there are so many things we have to remember. Like I love, just was reading one of your messages that you had sent me this morning. You remembered that we get scammed constantly in our email, and I should be aware of that. And it's frustrating.
It is. Because you're like, is this real? And then, I truly now just Google search every company just to make sure that it happened. And like Reddit was already on top of it. They're like, it's not a scam per se. It's just like being squeezed for money that you don't need to spend.
Yeah, to do something that the way they frame it is like, you have to be like, what's the word? Compliant.
Yeah.
They use the words like compliant.
Yes. Yeah.
And if I'm not compliant, then I'm out of compliance, which means I get in trouble, and I don't like to get in trouble.
No, I don't like get in trouble either. But it was very clearly one of those things where like we're not actually handling any of the credit card information, so it really has nothing to do with us.
Okay, that makes
like if
we're problem solving.
Yeah.
This is what all of our meetings are like.
And I always handle it better if it's someone else's problem they're coming to me with than if it's like I'm dealing with it.
Yeah.
Because I almost did a scam thing as I'm going to Ireland in May, and for Northern Ireland you have to get a special like UK not a travel visa, but like it's a travel certificate.
Yeah.
And when I Google searched how to do it, I found a website, right, that was sort of on top of the list. And I was about to go through it, and they were going to charge me like $150. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure my friend told me this was like £10. And so I did some Google searching, and yeah, I almost got scammed. Not scammed, but like a website that does the work for you and just charges you a crap ton for it. I'm like, we're all susceptible, susceptible to it.
Well, and to your earlier point of like, there's so much information out there these days. There's also lots of bad information.
There's a lot of bad information,
and I hate that like we're in these like info wars, if you will, about like is it good or bad or whatever, and like now we're introducing technology to determine if the information is bad or good, and I'm like, I don't even trust the technology to tell me that either. So it's really quite something, this world we live in.
Yeah, it's upsetting when the barriers that we thought were put up to protect us are not there and are just, Google wants to make money, and so if you pay Google enough money to sponsor your website at the top of a Google search, you really have to scroll down almost an entire half page before you see a real search thing.
Yeah.
Google, get better.
Yeah.
Do better.
We had a little holiday shopping snafu the other just this past season where everyone in my house loves Squishmallows. You know what Squishmallow is?
Yes, I'm familiar.
Naomi's girlfriend wanted a Squishmallow, and she like sent a link to the website. Well, we went to the website, and like every single one of us in the house like tried to purchase that, and the credit card information would never go through. It would say like, try again with the new payment or whatever. We tried all of our cards, and then Naomi was like the smart one of the group to Google search, is Squishmallow website real? And it turns out it was a scam, and it was collecting all of our credit card information, and so we had to renew all of it. It's just like, it's wild, and I'm very susceptible to consumer traps.
Yeah, and we all. I mean, listen, there's a science behind it, and they know that science very well.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
If only we could discover the science of getting more listeners to our podcast.
Hey, we're working on.
We're working on that,
and I think that is by producing content and just getting it out.
That's
there.
right.
Thank you for listening.
Yes, like and subscribe.
Exactly.
I'm looking at the camera.
Well, let's jump into kind of like our first segment here. And it really is, like I said, a little jaunt down memory lane of, our first memories of each other.
All
and
right.
I would love for you to go first. And it's fun to get, halfway through your side of it and me realize, okay, that's exactly how I remember it. But we'll see if we have differing tales.
Okay. So, my first memory of you is, I had pre-lockdown, I had met with Aaron Miller and just talking about podcasting stuff. I had lost my nonprofit job, was thinking about starting a production company, and I was like, what can I do? Blah, blah, blah. And I think that, I don't know when in like 2019 that meeting was, but I know like in, I guess, maybe April of 2020, I got connected. Aaron Miller connected the two of us because you wanted to start a podcast at Tulsa.
It's very okay. I'm not gonna fact check your timeline here, but keep going.
Okay, and then I my first memory is having a Zoom meeting with you to talk about what became Grow With Us. That's sort of that's the first memory I have. At some point in 2020, I assumed it was in lockdown because we were on Zoom, but maybe it was pre-lockdown and we just did Zoom anyway.
I think it was 2021.
Okay, well, even better.
Because that time I was like. April 2020, I still hadn't graduated college yet.
All right.
And
so I definitely had the year wrong. All right. That's fine.
But you had started, I mean, this is all important information because this is low key going to be like a autobiography of our working together. But you had done the Leadership Tulsa Thrive.
Yes, correct.
Yes. So you had already met Marcia.
Yep.
The idea of taking your podcast destiny into your own hands had already been planted. But yeah, we met via Zoom, and I'm pretty sure Aaron was my boss at the time, and so he was like, "Do you know Jesse?" And I was like, no, but it sounds everyone has been telling me that I need to be Jesse, which I know you love hearing.
I do love hearing that.
Everyone says you should know this guy. But yeah, we met, and we talked about like. That was the first time we talked about podcasting. And I think we didn't really like go into the Grow With Us thing too much until the end of like my idea, because like I wanted to know like what your understanding of podcasting was even like in Tulsa, since you had been here. I mean, I had been in Tulsa, like I said, my whole life and everything, but for 4 years I was gone, and I had like kind of just come back, and new eyes on the scene and everything. But I'd also never stepped into the podcast like production space. It had just fully been a like passion, or I wouldn't say passion necessarily. It's just been an interest. And so meeting someone that was like, you know, wanting to get the scene going here in Tulsa was like exhilarating for me, because I think we both approached this topic and like that conversation with like energy and like excitement, which was really fun. And from there, I mean, like now I'm like trying to remember like how quickly we got Grow With Us started, because I do remember I recorded the first episode at your house.
Oh yeah, in my rental house.
Yes.
Oh my God, I do remember that
neighborhood.
Oh God, I miss that. I miss that back room of that house. That was such a perfect podcasting space.
It was awesome. I loved that space.
I mean, it's funny. Like now that we have this studio, it's great because people don't have to come to my house. But like that back area of the house really allowed me to have like a true sort of studio where like unless people needed to go to the bathroom, they didn't have to come into my like house.
Yeah.
And that was really nice, and I miss that now.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm pretty sure fall of 2021 is when Grow With Us started.
Yeah.
And
the first episode released July of 2021. So we did it like probably May or so. It was with Nicole Hortonet in Tulsa. Shout out Nicole. Hey. But yeah, I mean, from there, like I've seen you and we've interacted, and our relationship has like grown and blossomed. And that was 4 years ago, which is crazy. But we're doing it. We're podcast executives.
We're doing it.
Now.
We have a video out there that Mike keeps sharing, which is great. Even though I feel like I look fat in it, but that's just video for you. Yeah, no, I mean, again, having a business partner is great because you and I have different strengths, and it's nice not to have to sort of weaken myself focusing on things that like drain me.
Yeah.
That if those are things you are excited about, I'm like, okay, you do that, and I will focus on this.
Yeah.
And it's been great.
I think about our like. You're definitely the CEO of this whole network, but you also hold the title of Chief Technology Officer.
Yeah, I'm also that, yes.
Because you definitely know how to do the technical things that I don't know how to do. You're the product is also how I pitch you to people.
Which is very, very humbling, and I appreciate it.
I'm the brains in some way. Like I think that we're both extroverted. Obviously, we have our own podcasts, and you have networked yourself into Rant 9 being this whole thing before Pod for Good became into fruition. But like like you said, there is this like complementary relationship in our working styles that I think is benefiting us as we continue to grow, and we're very early stages.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and I mean, if you work, especially if you work for nonprofits, but it happens in regular businesses too, where you notice like the best sort of run organizations have like an executive director or a CEO that is usually sort of focused on like big things, and not focused on the details. And they have a number two, whether it's a director of development or whatever, who is a detail-oriented person, and they are a team, and that's how things get done. And every successful place I've worked for has had that sort of top-down. One person is, inspiring and thinking big, and the other person's like, okay, here's how we get to that point. Here's A through Z of that.
Well, and I think we both have that like big picture thing, but for different things.
Yes.
Like, I don't know. It's fascinating to me to like. We meet weekly and talk about these things, so this is almost starting to sound like one of those conversations, which is fun for us. But not necessarily
listeners, I hope you're enjoying our weekly catch-up meetings that we have.
But it's fun to. I mean, we're in the process of building a media, entertainment, podcast production network for people that. There's so much going. There's so much, I think, like a mission and vision behind the network, and like you're looking at the two guys that I think honestly are trying to make it accessible, financially viable for creators, and like we have the experience under our belt to do so. And so, in order for this to not sound like a pitch, like that is like what that is the nature of our relationship, and kind of how it's evolved from that original conversation, which is cool.
I mean, I know. I mean, again, I apparently I didn't remember when our actual first meeting was, but I do remember a sense of like this guy gets why podcasting is fun, and he sort of sees what podcasting can be. And normally I have to like explain those parts to new clients, but you already came in knowing that and wanting it to be this. And because you'd had some experience podcasting already, like you had a passion for it the way most clients of mine, they have a passion for like the idea of like spreading a message, but not necessarily the art of podcasting, which is what excites you and I.
Yeah, because at the time I had self-produced and come out with season 1 of this podcast, which is crazy. I just remembered that was a part of my resume at the time. But like you said, having this experience was something that like I saw like the end to end, if you will, of like what it takes to not storyboard, but depending on what your project is, storyboard, come up with all the concepts for the shows, schedule the interviews, record all the interviews, edit all the interviews, publicly release all of them, do all the marketing. Like there's a lot that goes into, what you're hearing and seeing being a thing. It was an idea. For instance, I messaged Jesse 2 weeks ago, hey, can I get you on the schedule to record this episode? And here we are.
That's right. I mean, that's a incredibly fast turnaround for most people. Scheduling, behind the curtain sort of thing for listeners. And anyone who is involved in any sort of scheduling knows this. Scheduling's the hardest thing.
Yeah.
It's the thing that takes up the most time and the most amount of emails.
Yeah.
It's just scheduling.
But it allows for us to create content and entertaining content, inspiring content. I think that that's something that I've noticed. Like if I were to give you and like Rant 9 and now like Pod for Good, like kind of a theme is that like all of the content that we make is like, I would say, inspiring content, whether it is like amplifying the mission of an organization or like allowing for someone to explore a passion project. Like there's an element of inspiration that is associated with that. And this podcast is a great example of that because, I'm inspired by the concept of memory as a tool for connection to people and to ourselves. And I really like reflection, and I think that it's fun, and we get to do it. And now I get to do it with people that I like to do.
Yeah, it's, again, probably not to get on another tangent, but like, again, my background's in like history, and it took me a while to realize my love of podcasting was also tied into my idea of how I view history, which is not sort of like the great man theory of history, but like the people movement of history. Like it's people's individual stories that make sort of the tapestry that is the story. And podcasting is just another way of storytelling.
I think we've had this conversation many times, but like my definition of podcasting has like changed as the industry has expanded, but also like as I've seen it, the medium be like, I've decided to describe it as a medium because it really can be informative, educational, like kind of daily news type of thing. There's literally so many different like applications of podcasting to whatever message or creative expression you're trying to get out there. So it's really cool.
Yeah, it's like a sandbox. A podcast can really be anything.
Well, on that note, let's kind of dive into what our topic is today. Any guesses? I love asking my guests if you have any thoughts about what I'm gonna take you down today.
I mean, listen, we could get into like the philosophical weight of what is memory and how our memories change over time, what we remember, why we remember it. I was thinking. I don't know what you're going to ask me, but I do know it's going to make me think about how I remember things.
Okay.
So.
I love that. Well, really, like, the topics themselves are, like, fun things, like media-based or, like, we've done photography, we've done genres of music like K-pop. I did, like, one of my earliest episodes was like about religion. We're not going to talk about religion today. I'm not feeling
you're not feeling it today. That's fine.
No, but we are going to dust off our filing cabinets and our memory banks. Start up our hippocampuses, which is where memory is stored. If you didn't know that, and we're going to reminisce into our topic today, and. Shockingly enough, we've actually already been talking about it for 15 minutes. We're going to talk about our favorite and least favorite memories relating to podcasting.
Ooh, all right. All right.
As you and I have been kind of talking for the last couple of minutes about like one, are just our passion and our interest in it. Like, I want to get to like the highlights and the lowlights of like us in this space as creators, consumers, anywhere in between. Because obviously we were inspired by a podcast that we listened to even to venture into this space. But I'd love to kind of go through those with you, because I don't think I know some of your favorite or some of your favorite podcasts or things like that. But I'm excited to know more.
All right.
Well, and as my guest, I'd love for you to rack your brain and start us off with your favorite memory relating to podcasting. And you can take your time thinking about it. Typically, whatever comes to mind first is what you remember. But take your time.
So, okay, I think this is definitely the earliest positive podcast memory I have, which is, in grad school, between 2005 and 2007, when podcasts first came out around 2005, when the name podcast came to be, I remember I was working at the Graduate Student Administration Office at Brandeis University, and I was doing a lot of, data entry, filing, whatnot. So a lot of time by myself when I had time to listen to podcasts. But this was so early in the time of podcasting that the iPhone hadn't come out yet. The first Android phone hadn't come out yet.
We're still on like iPod Classics. Like, there's not even an iPod Touch released at this point.
Yeah, no. So that's where my iPod comes in. And at the time, Apple would only let you transfer stuff between an iPod on one computer.
Yeah.
And I was like, but I need to do it on two computers, because the podcasts I were listening to, which were mostly just radio shows that were podcasted, came out in like the early afternoon, and I would already be at school and wouldn't be able to download them. Yeah. And so I did a little internet research and discovered there was a text file on Windows machines that had a 6-digit code on them, and that was the code that between iTunes and your iPod would tell your iPod whether it was allowed to exchange music or not. So I just copied the code from my laptop at home, put it on this work computer, and was then able to download the Tony Kornheiser radio show, maybe some of the Slate ones when they came out. So that was me defeating Apple's proprietary whatever crap they like to do to make it difficult to, and again, you had to plug the iPod into the computer and transfer the podcast. It didn't have any internet capability itself. So mastering that was truly my earliest happiest podcast moment.
I love that. Well, and it's like the determination to consume this media. What was the show again? Oh,
it was a Tony Kornheiser show. He's the host of Pardon the Interruption on ESPN. He also had a local He also had a local ESPN show that again was mostly Washington D.C. sports based. Yeah. But I just liked him and his guests so much, and it was something to listen to.
And that guy.
Wilbon, a lot of other David Aldridge, like lots of great. He also had like a lot of side characters, like his producer, who I think actually had a fake British accent the whole time. Nigel was very funny, and and it was like it was a good like hour and a half long show, and so like that would get me through.
I feel like they were longer when like in the early days.
Yeah, well, because it was originally like an AM FM radio show, and those usually go like 2 to 3 hours with breaks, and so this was just all that without the breaks. Pretty much the only editing was editing out the advertising breaks.
Yes,
and then releasing it.
That's so interesting. Pardon the interruption. That guy was your.
He's an old curmudgeon Jew from Brooklyn, so it was like hanging out with a member of my family.
He's still on the air. Like, I go to the gym, and he is still on PTI every.
He's still
it's
there. It's
like 4:00 on SportsCenter or ESPN 1 or 2 or whatever. My brother used to watch Around the Horn and PTI like concurrently because they were on like right
after each other. Yeah,
after we got home from school.
Yep. Yeah, the Around the Horn host was like a PTI intern originally, and so
that's cool.
Yeah, it's so that was like that, and I think like Slate was one of the first people to release like a weekly like new like politics, sports, culture, like 3 different podcasts on those topics, and so getting those was hard back then.
Well, it's like I feel like that's kind of what like Tony's like genre is like sports culture and like current events.
He talks on everything.
Sports news.
Yes.
Because like the whole structure of that show is like literally just like 1 minute like round table on like every topic that you can talk about relating to like sports and like every single sports. Like they go through hockey, football, like they talk about
that was the only way that was the only way I got hockey news. So as a non-hockey fan.
But you were up in The Northeast.
I
You
was.
were slightly interested.
I was. Yeah. Listen, I will say this for any of the sports fans who are watching who have been interested. There's nothing more chaotic and energetic than playoff hockey. I've never seen athletes go harder for a longer period of time than playoff hockey. Like I still don't understand what's happening, but man, I've never seen people just throw their bodies into something.
They want that Stanley Cup.
They want it. They want to drink out of that cup so bad. So.
Well, I love that. I think what's fun about that story, and I like that it's one of your favorites and earliest, is because it like really, I think, timestamps the medium as like digital evolution.
Yeah.
Because like, how analog is it to think that you have to plug this device into this device?
Yep.
Just for the
Yeah.
file transfer
Yep.
to happen, essentially.
It was really. I mean, like there was barely Wi-Fi at that point.
Yeah.
And the Wi-Fi was slow, and so you just manually download it on iTunes at the time. Yeah, and like again, somehow I was able to install iTunes on this computer at Brandeis, and no one seemed to notice. But that that happens. So.
Well, and then like the whole process of now you're mobile with a piece of entertainment that you want to consume. You can do anything.
Yeah.
You can go do a data like entry project for
Yeah.
however long it takes. Literally, it could probably take anywhere between, I don't know how long some of your data stuff would take, but like 4 hours.
Yeah.
And maybe you had 3 episodes logged for you to watch. That became like my timestamp for productivity, was like, how many podcast episodes am I going to get through?
Yeah.
And I used to think of, it used to be TV shows, because I would always think about like, the TV release cycle was like every 30 minutes. My cartoon on Disney Channel would change from one thing to the next. And so I have, a TV show's worth of time to like do X, Y, or Z or whatever. But it being mobile, I think like really kind of set the stage for how we live our lives now in a lot of ways. Or at least that's how I think about it like that.
Well, what's from a technological standpoint, what's interesting now is that I used to, even up until I'd say maybe 3 years ago, I didn't like streaming the podcast. I liked physically downloading them to my phone. Because
You wanted to support the analytics.
Yes, I did. I did. And now it's like I listen to so many podcasts, and I listen to them so sporadically because I'm too busy editing our clients' podcast that like I just hit stream, and I'll download it if there's an issue, or like I'm getting on a plane or whatever.
Yeah.
But now I'm streaming them all the time. And what's nice about that is that doesn't fill up my phone, because I can make a little playlist on my podcasting app for all like the sports podcasts I listen to, all the Star Trek ones I listen to, and they're just there, and I'm not actually filling up space until I actually start playing it.
See, it's so funny that like you are so not a sports person to me.
That's so interesting.
It doesn't like click to me that you consume sports media.
Well, I'm gonna tell you a little something. And I feel like comedians have talked about this now, but there's actually not a huge difference between like sports fans and nerds, and here's why. Because it's all I mean, you look at baseball now, like it's all about analytics. It's all about analyzing situations.
It's
like
so many stats.
I view I got into sports because it was a conversation topic I could talk to here in
Basically
Oklahoma
anybody,
with anybody,
yeah.
right? But I also I fell in love with basketball as a teenager, and I can send you the picture of me in Knicks garb for my birthday when I was 14.
Oh, that's cool.
But I just loved basketball as a sport. I'm not saying I played well, but I could play it, and because of the way my brain worked, I just wanted to know like why certain things were successful, why things worked, why they didn't.
Yeah.
And
the strategy.
Yeah, and
games.
from the nerd side of it, we are nerds. I mean, not to stereotype an entire group of people, but like I don't like things. I love
Speak
things.
for your culture.
Yeah. Meaning like when I've discovered something that I enjoy, like I have to learn everything about it.
Yeah.
I can't just like I'm like, oh yeah, I enjoy that, but I'm not gonna learn everything about who made it or the actors on it or who's writing it or whatever. I have to know.
Yeah.
So the same thing with sports. Like if I like a team, I'm like, well, one, why do I like this team? What is it that attracted me? And then how do these philosophies and schemes and whatnot work?
Interesting. I do think that's a really good framing device for like nerd culture,
Yeah,
if you
and
will.
is collecting baseball cards any different than collecting Pokemon? I don't think so.
No, not at all. There's
So-
stats. There's little icons that
Yep.
tell you how many things that
Yep.
thing has versus the other things.
There are ones that are more rare than others, but only slightly, right?
Minting
Yep.
condition.
Oh God, yeah. So I have so many basketball cards that are so worthless now. I don't know what I was thinking, but
That's so funny. And no, I think that it's probably tied up in like game theory or something like that. The actual similarities between like sports and video games, because like I think that nerd subculture, the subculture of being a nerd, like has like its own subcultures, if you will.
It does.
Like there are literally like the guys that are the talking heads on all like ESPN and literally any show that's probably like this, but just about sports. Like they either present as like that guy with glasses, or like the big buff guy.
Yeah, the former
like,
player.
Former player.
Yeah, it's former player and nerds.
Yes. Yes.
You know, and again, like I'm of the age where like it wasn't super acceptable to just be a nerd growing up. Like I had my own struggles with that.
Yeah.
Now, like everyone's a nerd about everything.
Yes.
So the way culture is now, people can obsess over, like everyone's okay with other people's obsessions.
Absolutely.
Like as long as it doesn't bother them, and I'm fine with that too.
Yeah, that's funny you bring that up. We had like a little icebreaker in a meeting today, and the question was like, what could you talk about for hours? And like my boss was like, the Great British Bake Off. And I was like, that is like something that some people will obsess over like religiously, whether it's like Paul Hollywood or Prue or Mary Berry, or if it's like the actual desserts and the science behind like the confection, like everything. It's really kind of crazy. My answer to that question was like, I have encyclopedic knowledge of RuPaul's Drag Race. And I can talk about podcasting for a really long time. I knew I was going to do it today, so I was like, let me get my brain going.
I have an encyclopedic knowledge of Star Trek, mostly Star Trek Next Generation, but now pretty much all Star Trek, and podcasting, and just like weird technology things.
Yeah. My third one was the Real Housewives, because I do find the like universe to be expansive enough and crossovery enough to be like almost endlessly entertaining. If you have like that like I don't know, like that sense of curiosity that I think a lot of cinephiles have, like where like, I'd like to know that this person is connected to this person because like they were married at one time, because like they were rich at that point and not rich at this point. Like that's the Housewives lore that like actually I enjoy. The drama is just an added bonus. It's an added bonus.
It's funny. I mean, reality shows are interesting. Again, like other than the Great British Bake Off and the first season of Flavor of Love, I have not watched that many reality shows.
But that's such a great season of television.
It is. It was. I would say the peak.
Absolutely.
It was just insane. It was so like it's one of those things where it was the first to be that insane. And
absolutely.
And I remember. I mean, I think I watched some like seasons of Real World early on. But now, like like my favorite streaming channel, Dropout, has like a that's not it's a cooking show. I don't know if it's a reality show per se, but I do watch the Michelle, my wife, finally got me into the Great British Bake Off, and I'm constantly just like, why is no one game theorying this? Like these people are peaking too early. Like you gotta stay in the middle of the pack for like the first like 5 episodes, and then you start showing it. And like I'm like, when is someone gonna game theory this show?
Well,
like
they I don't know, because it's all based on the premise that they are amateur bakers.
I know,
which I'm like, amateur.
Yeah,
how does an amateur know how to make a meringue? Like
seriously,
that's insane.
Also, like the only thing I would be practicing is how to make caramel, just all the time, because like they're constantly messing that up. I'm like, I know there is a science to it. I know there's also a temperature thing to it, but like I know they have time to practice. Like they should be practicing that nonstop. Also, they should be practicing it on the kind of stoves they have there.
I was gonna say that's the outlying like thing, is that you're never gonna be able to like recreate the conditions of the 10.
Electric stove. So I want one of those ovens. I want the oven door that slide all the way down. That'd be really handy.
And they have the proofing drawers in them too.
Yeah,
it's really awesome.
Anyway, I love the bread episodes. I'm a bread person. So
so I'm gonna tell you my favorite memory relating to podcasts. I don't know if I'm like, I feel like I told you this in our first meeting, but there's a chance that's been 4 years now. You might not remember it.
Yeah.
But it's very similar to yours in the sense that like the podcasting got me through a menial task because I had podcasting. I wasn't sitting there doing nothing or being bored. So in the summer after my freshman year of college, I would say like that is like the first time I had listened to podcasts before then. I think there was a podcast called Dude Soup that was done by Rooster Teeth's Funhouse, which is the like LA-based version of that production company. I would like always listen to their podcast, but other than that, I think it was like probably the only one I listened to. But because of like the Rooster Teeth universe, I was listening to like all their podcasts, and one of them was a show called Always Open, where like basically the premise of that show was the girls would get around the table and talk about things very openly, give it like sex or relationship or whatever, and they mentioned My Favorite Murder. And talked about like that show, and I was like, "What is this show? Like, I've got to look at it, or I've got to like figure it out." And the summer after my the summer after my freshman year of college, I was working on an oil refinery in Alaska.
Wow.
And like think the movie Holes, like we literally lived like that basically. Like it was dude camp, dude ranch, all that stuff. And I only had like my phone, and we had Wi-Fi. Like you could watch Netflix or whatever at that point on streaming or whatever. But like there was not a lot of entertainment options in Dead Horse, Alaska, which is north of the Arctic Circle.
It was called Dead Horse?
It was called Dead Horse, Alaska, in Prudhoe Bay. And this is like where all of the oil collection and discovery like happens in Alaska. Like all of Alaska's oil production is essentially like localized in this one spot. And I was working as a skilled helper first class, which is basically like a SK1 had like 3 jobs that they could do. One was called Firewatch, where you watched people work and made sure that a fire didn't start.
Okay.
And if it did, you were the first person to call for help. You just watched people work.
All right.
There was another one called Spill Champion, and you are watching a tank fill up with water, and you can't let any water spill out because all of this oil discovery is happening on a nature preserve, and so they don't want any contaminants on the ground or whatever.
Good to know, protecting nature.
Yeah. And the third one was confined space attendant.
Ugh.
And so you were watching workers go into a confined space, and you had to like do accounting of like all the people that went in, and you had to make sure that all those people came out. Especially if there was an emergency, you had to make sure that you knew who was in there.
Count your numbers.
It was crazy. And so for some reason, I think it was because I was... I don't know, maybe my disposition just like was the way that it was. I was obviously presenting pretty authentically who I am, not the nails. But like I'm at like a very heterosexual like work environment, and I was definitely being like, I wasn't called like any slurs or anything like that. Like the guys actually like really respected me, which is really odd. But my job was actually none of those 3 things. I ended up being able to work in the material yard, where like essentially I was like they would give us or they would give us like the name of a job, and then I would have to organize all the parts that bit of work needed, so that anytime the foreman came, I could be like, here's all of your parts that you need. And so I was a good little organizer. And I listened to My Favorite Murder like all the time while I was doing that, and that was when you could download like podcasts on your phone. I guess you can always download them, but like it was automatically downloading. But I think I listened to, at that point, that show had been out for like a year and a half. I think it started in like early 2015. So they had like over 70 episodes. I listened to every single episode in like a very, very short amount of time. To the point where like I caught up to like them taking Facebook submissions for hometown murders, which is like one of the premises of the show, and they would do hometown episodes, and I have a crazy hometown murder because this is low-key would be your hometown murder too, because you grew up in Tulsa. But do you remember the Girl Scout murders that happened in like the early 70s?
I do know those.
Yes.
Yeah.
So my mom was at the camp
Whoa.
when it happened, and was like, the name of the camps that they were in were like native tribes. So it's like Osage or like Apache or Chickasaw or whatever. My mom was like literally in the camp, one over. And so my favorite memory is that I wrote in to the Facebook page for the fan page of this podcast, and like it started like a crazy conversation of like people from all over the world or seemingly all over the United States who had a connection to that murder or who were fascinated by it or had never heard about it. And it just sparked this interest for everyone to like create this conversation about, this Girl Scout murder that happened in Oklahoma of all places. I think it was like it was at Camp David, which is like Fort Gibson or something. I don't remember where
I'm not sure.
like geographically it is. But anyways, they like the button on the story is that I like had submitted my hometown murder to the Facebook group, and like my last week of working on the slope in Alaska, they had read the hometown murder or whatever, and that whole thing had happened on the Facebook page. But they decided to like make it a main feed episode, and so they did not my suggestion, but like my hometown murder on the main feed, and like then they did the whole story, and I was like gagged because these are my like favorite podcasters. Like within a very short time of me developing that interest, like already took it and made content from it, which was so freaking cool. And that's the reason I'm here doing all this, honestly.
I realized that we both answered the question. I was like, what was our favorite like memory as a podcast listener?
Yeah.
I do have it's not my favorite, but like the most powerful memory I have as a podcast host.
Oh, do it.
If you want to hear that.
I would love to.
So the first podcast I officially got to start for a job, right? I had done the Rant 9 podcast with my friends starting in like 2012 using Google Meets on Air, which is a thing that doesn't exist anymore. But, I got hired at jewishboston.com, which was a website to sort of collect all the events that were happening in Boston for Jews. And my pitch as like content manager was like, you guys should have a podcast. And so I got hired, and they're like, do it. And so, I started doing it, like learned more about microphones and editing and all that. That's where I got to spend like professional time learning some of this stuff. But one of the episodes we did was there was this sort of nonprofit from Israel that was coming to visit, and it is a nonprofit that pretty much is made up of the family members of people who have died in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict on both sides. So it's like Israeli parents, Palestinian parents, whatever, coming to preach peace and understanding and whatnot. And we had it was a Israeli mother and a Palestinian father. Like they weren't even close in age necessarily, but they were like sort of on a national tour to draw attention to this. And we got to interview them. And I've never cried before as a podcast host, but these two, like just the way like she started crying and he comforted her, which then made us cry. Yeah. And it was just like, it reminded me, because I listen to a lot of like silly, not important podcasts most of the time, like how powerful this medium can be.
Yeah. Especially when it's real voices and real stories.
It made me do a better job as a host going forward, because even if we're talking about silly things, like there are powerful moments that can happen in these conversations using this medium when people really sort of open up in a way that they might not do if there's like a TV camera in their face.
Yeah,
not
absolutely.
necessarily Sony, ZV-1, ZV-10 as we have here.
Well, people forget, like, even like I think the idea behind podcasting, like it being a very versatile medium, is that like even though if you're in a very produced environment, like with microphones and cameras and everything, the genuine human connection that is happening between 2 or 3 people is still happening regardless. Like people forget that all these things exist. Yeah. And so those really raw and tender moments like become so like they become so meaningful because they are captured, and they're captured in like a way that wasn't expected necessarily. I know you expect to get content, but you don't necessarily expect to have that like raw emotional reaction, which is why like I think My Favorite Murder was always one of my favorite podcasts, because they would get upset about these horrible atrocities they're talking about. Yeah. They're retelling the story of this girl who was like who against all odds, like, I guess like there's one crazy story where like this woman like gets kidnapped because she's hitchhiking, and the guy like chops off both of her arms, and she falls down a ravine in California, and she freaking survives. Like somehow she survives. Karen loves telling the I survived stories because like it is wild. That, like someone can. There are just stories out there that are so mind-boggling that I feel like the hearing it from someone's voice, hearing it from someone's experience of them experiencing what that story was even like is what makes it like a very meaningful medium. And I love that you had that experience. And I do think, I agree. I think it makes you a better host in some ways because you know how to hold space. I know that's kind of like being memed right now, but like it's good.
It's being memed, but like it's one of those things where like it's being memed because it's effective. Like you've seen me do this when I'm talking to people about how to be a good podcast host. Like, what's the one thing I always tell them? Like, silence is a tool.
Yeah.
People will fill it, and so if you're actually trying to get an answer out of somebody, say nothing.
Yeah.
And things will come out.
And yeah, people will start to divulge.
Yeah.
I think mine as a host, my favorite memory as a host is kind of like
this episode right now. No, I'm just kidding.
I think it's like, I mean, Grow With Us is really special to me. It's my other show I'm talking about. It's Showception. We're getting very meta here.
Cross promotion.
But like Grow With Us has had some episodes that I feel like, I don't know if I can name a specific one because I do find them all meaningful, but there's been some moments where like I have gotten emotional as a host because like there are some amazing people in this town. There are some people that are doing things for communities that really are the difference between that community like getting the respect that it deserves or being shunned and silenced by racism and institutional barriers. And there's one person that I have sitting in, that chair on my show to talk about that. And that hits me hard a lot of the times. I think maybe my episode with Gloria Arias, who is, she works at the Education Outreach Center with TCC as a professor. She teaches economics. I had her speak in English and in Spanish. And like that moment was meaningful to me because like it's also part of my life philosophy now to like, language is something I'm really passionate about, and I understand that English is very pervasive, but like I feel like only English speakers are like fully limiting their worldview if you're not attempting to learn another language. You conceptualize your understanding of who you are differently in a different language. And I think that really set in when I did that episode, which was really fun. So,
first of all, I would just shout out to the Spanish language. It's an incredibly fun language to learn, and is one of the few languages spoken at the speed in which I actually talk. So it is, it's fun in that regard.
Well, let's flip the script a little bit and go down like our least favorite. And I like the doing both of like as a listener and as a host because I do think that it's pretty encompassing. But yeah, we're gonna go into the memory dumps. If you go into your hippocampus and you take a left, you fall down into the memory dumps. And so, yeah, what's your least favorite memories?
Well, I mean,
when it comes to podcasting.
My least favorite memories of podcasting are all going to be production related because I don't really have like, other than just like getting tired of a podcast and not listening to it anymore. Like those aren't bad memories. They're just like I'm interested in this other thing now.
Yeah. Your interests change.
Interest change.
Change it up.
I mean, especially for if you're listening to like sports and culture podcasts, sometimes there's just not anything that you're interested in happening in that sphere. Yeah. So you don't necessarily need to listen to a podcast about it. But no, all of my worst podcasting memories are all production fails. So whether that was one of the first New You episodes where this computer right here crashed in the middle of an OBS recording, and I didn't know that because it kept ticking up like it was recording until I tried to stop it. And so we could only use the audio and a picture of the person on the episode. that one sucked. Other bad ones. There was an episode of a Be Atento podcast where the guest was out of focus the entire time and I didn't notice.
Oh, that happened on this season of this show.
Yeah, it happens. Like the cameras love to focus on the microphone here and not on the face. And not to get too behind the scenes of anything, but because of the split screen we're doing, we're off centering the cameras, and so we're confusing them by the setup we're doing. And so sometimes they want to focus on other things. And so looking incompetent to people who hired me to be technically competent at something, those are my least favorite memories.
Oh, absolutely. Well, because it's like, and it's really the technology's fault. Like you can't go to the client and be like, the camera just decided to not work that day. But like, it is just kind of the only explanation that, we can come to.
Yeah.
But it absolutely is very frustrating. And I think that the production part of podcasting is something that every podcast has gone through that journey.
Yeah.
If you listen to the first episode of My Favorite Murder, the audio probably sounds crunchy. I don't know if they ever go back and remaster them or whatever. Some people do. Some people spend the time on audio quality in order to do that. But some people just put shit out there. And that's what's kind of fun, is that you can typically, the audience is forgiving in the first couple, and then it settles in.
Yeah.
And
the people get better.
Yeah.
I'm glad that the first, I think 12 episodes of the Rant 9 podcast, my very first podcast, are just they're gone now. Because I switched hosts so many times, they just got lost somewhere in the transfer. And I'm okay with that. Because again, we weren't using professional mics. We were recording it on, the Google Meets on Air made a YouTube video, and I would just grab the audio from that YouTube video and throw it into Audacity. And that's how I made the podcast. I was also using a song I didn't license, but the recording artist said not to worry about it unless we got big, which we didn't. So, shout out to They Might Be Giants PR team for not sending me a cease and desist.
We don't love cease and desist.
No, we don't. But I appreciate them being we'll deal with it if it becomes a problem. It's a very kind way of saying I don't have enough downloads for it to even matter. Yeah. Which was nice of them. They still could have been mean about it. Yeah. And they weren't.
So is that production related on both the listener and
there have been lots of podcasts where the guest is you could tell they clearly record the guest on Zoom and their mic sucks, and I might stop listening because the quality's bad. But that's not a bad podcast memory. That's just me being an audio snob.
Yeah, exactly.
Which I've been long before I got into this business, to be honest with you. I didn't realize this is why I was like this. Yeah. But I've always cared about audio quality. I just didn't know it had a name.
Yeah, absolutely, and a profession. I think for me, I would say probably my least favorite memory relating to podcasts as a listener is I think you touched on it, is that once a podcast reaches a point where I'm no longer interested. Yeah. And that always is sad, because often I think about I typically develop a relationship with the show's
you become
host.
Yes, it's a parasocial relationship where you think they're your friends even though you've never met them in real life.
Exactly. And with the routine of on this day listen, and on this day I'm typically doing the same thing to where I can listen, losing that routine sometimes feels like you're losing a friend, you're losing that once constant thing. And I think for me, a show, I'm trying to remember if there's a specific show that this has happened with. I mean, My Favorite Murder, kind of, I don't listen to it anymore. And it's not my least favorite memory that I don't listen to that show anymore. It's that I don't have, I think that show built up my love and admiration for the genre of true crime podcasting. Yeah. And then true crime podcasting became the biggest form of or one of the biggest genres in podcasting, to where the market became oversaturated, and I was oh my gosh, let me listen to these other stories. And I'm not gonna talk shit about other podcasts, I guess, but Crime Junkie and True Crime Garage and Fruit Loops. There's all these different
Fruit
shows.
Loops? There's one called Fruit Loops?
There's one called Fruit Loops.
Okay.
Which I'm it's kind of, what? I don't know. It's an interesting name. But they were, and that premise was to talk about serial killers or crime committers of color, which I'm I love when representation goes that far.
Yeah, okay.
That we have to talk about we can't talk about all the white people that murdered people. We have to talk about all the other people.
Listen. Yeah, diversity. Are you happy now, people?
Exactly. I think maybe that is my least favorite. I really do not listen to any more true crime podcasts these days. I think that I do have an interest in it, but the world is so dark enough that an interest I used to have because of podcasting has really fizzled that flame. Also, I'm getting older and more cynical and realizing that there's daily horrors around us all the time. Yep. I don't need to listen to two white women, if you will, talk for over an hour about a horrible crime that happened to either a marginalized group of people or one person. I think I get what there is to get out of true crime, or I got what there was to get out of it. And now I'm no longer the podcasts that I choose to listen to now are most of the time hosted by drag queens or trans women because those are the people that make me laugh. And I am most of the time looking for a romp with my friends, and my friends are the people in my ears, you know, multiple times a week telling me about crazy shit that I care about. Like whether it's drag race related, whether it's like my Nympho Wars divas, like literally talk about everything. I love when Lady Gaga does something because then they will talk about it. Like I love when those moments happen in the world where you're like, I cannot wait to hear what my podcast divas have to say about this.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, I would say that that's like my least favorite, like listener behavior, like thing about podcast. My least favorite as a host, it's gonna. I mean, yeah, losing episodes is the worst. I guess this is it, and I should tell this story. This will memorialize it. I recorded an episode of this show, like in 2023 with my friends Rebecca and Julia, and it was a week after they had gotten gay married. It was amazing, and there was a cardboard cutout of Taylor Swift in the hallway of the studio, and I thought that it was funny to put the cardboard cutout of Taylor Swift behind the camera angle. And we recorded the whole episode, and it was like a bit that was funny and blah, blah, blah. And then I got Jesse in trouble because I didn't put the Taylor Swift cardboard cutout back. And like within 12 hours of this happening, there was a news article, there was news coverage on News on 6. Like our powers that be had been emailed and notified that the cardboard cutout was stolen.
There was camera footage of me putting it back. We won't say who called the news, but yeah, that was and then I guess the worst part of this story is that
there's no footage of it.
There's no footage of it.
The bit is gone. Like it's deleted from this computer. The episode will never be released. It was a fabulous episode because like it was my gay friend's gay wedding episode, and like it was just wild. And I think that's my least favorite memory about the whole production of it all because if you're not on your shit, you lose it. And everything you put into that, everything we put into this could be gone if we don't press stop record correctly and transfer the file to the right thing. Like that, there's literally so many places you can fuck it up, and that sucks sometimes. But that's movie magic, baby.
That's why you know I literally try to have 2 copies of every episode I record just in case.
Just in case.
Yeah, it's frustrating. It's frustrating when, like, again, you don't even realize you've lost it until it's over.
Oh, well, and my whole thing there was, like, you know, I recorded that episode to inspire me to do more, and then I didn't get inspired to do more until a year and a half later once we had already established the network, and it was a good idea to get some momentum behind my own show. And so, you know, I find, you know, it's lost in history, but the story is still fun. The news article is still out there. I was the Taylor Swift bandit, or whatever they wanted to call it. It was good PR for them. They're welcome, honestly. Well, Jesse, we're at our last segment. And really, I just want to open it up and zoom out a little bit from, you know, our topic of the day, which was podcasting. And, you know, in terms of memory, what are things you want to remember more of? Or if this like exercise in, you know, diving into your memory banks, like helped you be inspired by something relating to memory, like going forward, what would you like to remember more of?
Well, mostly I would like, and this is funny, this is like in sort of the creating memories part of it, but I have a tendency to not be present in a moment because I'm worried about something happening later.
Yeah.
And part of that is like my desire to not forget things, but then also like it's important to remember to be present in a moment and to not necessarily always worry about, like, remembering the feeling of something versus like trying to find a way to memorialize the event itself, right? Yeah. To exist in the moment first before being like, well, we have to get a token of this experience or whatever. We have to get a picture or whatever. Just actually enjoying the moment.
Yeah.
So, which is it's almost a way of turning off certain parts of your memory to capture other parts of your memory.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's hard because you have to like, I think you have to put in work. You have to put in work to your own, like, how you experience things, how you walk into a meeting or how you walk into an experience. Like, how am I going to remember this more? Do I need to get a picture with like everyone that I'm there with? Or do I need to, a lot of people are junk journaling now, which is like where you just, everything you get from everything you do, you keep, and then you know, all cutesy and kitschy, put it in a journal that's just full of shit. But it's full of memories. It's not full of shit. It's full of things that like you did to remember that more intentionally. So I think creating more memories, it's a good one. But Jesse, we did it. We remembered.
We did it.
Well, thank you so much for diving down memory lane with me. I think we have many more memories to make in our future, and I'm really excited to continue doing that work with you. So thank you, and thank you for being on this episode.
Yeah, you're very welcome.
And thank you so much for listening to this episode of I Can't Remember Shit.